Welcome back to Wall Street Podcast. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a space that's just exploding right now. Humanoid robotics, innovation, investment. It's all happening fast.
It really is. The pace is breakneck. You've got tech giants, governments, everyone pouring resources into this. It's still nascent, sure, but expanding incredibly quickly.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack the latest developments, look at how the market's reacting, and try to project where this is all heading, especially that competitive dynamic between the U.S. and China.
Right, and we're drawing heavily from a really comprehensive Morgan Stanley report, Humanoid Horizons. Who will build the android for androids?
Yeah, great title. It kicks off talking about this Android for Androids race. What are we seeing there?
Well, it's this flood of open source models and tools. Pretty much all the big tech players are involved.
Right. You've got Meta with VG2, that's their world model. Google DeepMind's got Gemini Robotics running on device now. Apple released that EgoDex dataset for manipulation.
And Huawei's Cloud Robo platform. It's more than just sharing code, isn't it? It feels strategic.
Definitely. It seems like a move to speed up development across the board, but also, lock developers into their own ecosystems, spreading their AI bets into the physical world.
And speaking of embracing this, China's approach has been, well, very public.
Oh, absolutely. Think about that humanoid boxing competition in Hangzhou, broadcast nationally.
Yeah, right after the Beijing Humanoid Half Marathon. It's not just tech demos, it's cultural integration, showing strong national backing.
And that backing includes serious money. The report highlights how China's capital markets are buzzing about embodied intelligence. May 2025 apparently saw a record 25 financing deals in the space.
That signals huge confidence.
It's a real funding frenzy over there.
Yeah.
Unitree, for example, reportedly closed its Series C, valuing them at, $1.7 billion, with big names like Geely, Ant Group, Tencent involved.
Wow. And Agibot added JD.com as an investor. Galbot raised $153 million, co-led by CATL.
Right, CATL, that's the biggest announced deal in the field there. Fortier's valuation hit RMB 8 billion. D-Robotics, that Horizon Robotics subsidiary, raised $100 million and already launched an SOA kit for humanoids.
And it's not just the big names. The report mentions more Chinese robotics firms are planning Hong Kong listings, focusing on both the hardware and the software side. It's full steam ahead.
And the hardware itself? It's getting better, but also maybe surprisingly cheaper.
That's a key point. Unitree is teasing a new bot, 26 Degrees of Freedom, potentially under $10,000.
Which is a big drop from their current G1, starting at $16,000. Makes it much more accessible.
Exactly. And look at Hugging Face. They showed off open source humanoids, one full size for $3,000 and a little desktop one for like $250.
Seriously, $250.
Yeah. And D-Robotics development kit is under $400. These price points are game changers for getting these things out there.
Okay, so the bodies are getting cheaper, more agile. Let's talk about the brains, the software, and AI improvements. That's moving fast, too.
Absolutely. Apple's EgoDex dataset, for instance. Over 800 hours of video from Apple Vision Pro, supposedly the biggest dataset for dexterous manipulation training.
Crucial for teaching them complex tasks. And Google
DeepMind put Gemini Robotics on the device. That means the AI runs locally on the robot.
Less latency, more reliable reactions, right?
Exactly. Makes them much more responsive in the real world. Meta's VJ2 is another big one, a 1.2 billion parameter open source world model.
Trained on over 1 million hours of video.
Yep. Claiming 65–80% success picking and placing new objects. It's about understanding and predicting the physical world.
So how's this translating into actual capabilities? Are we seeing robots do more complex stuff?
We are. 1X Technologies unveiled their Redwood model for the Eneo humanoid, doing end-to-end mobile manipulation. And Figure AI, they addressed criticism of short demos with a full hour-long video.
Right. The Figure 02 sorting packages using their Helix VLA model. That's vision language action. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, understanding commands, reacting visually. And in China, BAAI released RoboBrain 2.0, calling it the world's most powerful open source model. Huawei Cloud launched Cloud Robo, built on their Pangu models.
And underpinning all this AI data, you need tons of it.
Which is why something like Paxini's new data factory in Tianjin is significant. 12,000 square meters dedicated to generating embodied data. They expect 200 million trajectories.
Wow. Filling that data gap. Okay, so hardware is improving, software is getting smarter. Where are they actually being used outside the lab?
It's starting to move into real industry. The report mentions Foxconn and NVIDIA might deploy humanoids in a new Houston factory for AI server production, maybe by early 2026.
For building AI servers. Interesting, Luke.
And Amazon is reportedly testing them, including Unitree G1s for delivery operations. Hyundai plans to use Atlas bots in U.S. plants.
And Tesla, of course, still aiming for thousands of Optimus bots in their factories by year-end.
And UB Tech in China, their Walker S1 robots are rolling off the line and heading into a Dongfeng motor plant for training and work.
So, Luzu-made robots building Luzu-made cars. It's actually happening.
These deployments often rely on partnerships, too. Unitree is working with Reborn AI for faster training. Huawei's strategy is interesting. They're not building the bodies.
Right, focusing on the platform, Cloud Robo, and partnering with companies like UB Tech, iSoftStone.
Exactly. It's an ecosystem play.
Also saw news that the Tesla Optimus lead left and the autopilot head is taking over. And LG Innotek might supply cameras for Figure AI. The whole supply chain is snapping into place.
Okay, let's pivot to China's strategic push. The report calls it the Dragon's Roar. It really became a top government focus this year, right?
Yeah, Premier Li Qiang mentioned it specifically in the government work report. That's a major signal. Since early 2023, local governments have been rolling out policies, funds, institutions.
And it really ramped up in 2025, especially after Unitree was on that big CCTV gala and President Xi met their CEO.
That state backing is concrete. Wuhan, for instance, launched a RMB 1 billion fund just for humanoids, plus subsidies for deployment.
And the total government robotics funds across China now, around RMB 187 billion. That's roughly 26 billion US dollars.
It feels very familiar, doesn't it? Like the playbook they use for electric vehicles, batteries, drones.
The report makes that exact point, and it adds a critical perspective. People talk about the US lead in AI and chips, but the report argues manufacturing and physical intelligence are inextricably linked, meaning the real bottleneck for AI and robotics might be data. And data comes from building and deploying robots in the real world, which is tied to manufacturing scale.
So the ability to build and deploy at scale to collect data might be more decisive than just having the best theoretical AI.
That's the implication. And look at the patent numbers over the last 5 years. China, nearly 6,400 patents mentioning humanoid. US under 1,500.
That's a huge gap in IP filings.
And actual robot unveils tell a similar story. Since 2022, China accounts for almost 60% of notable humanoid unveils. US and Canada is around 24%. They're clearly focused on building and deploying.
Okay, let's look at the market side. How's this translating into investment performance? The Humanoid 100 Index.
Doing very well, actually. As of late June, it was up about 14.4% year-to-date, equal weighted. That's outperforming the S&P 500 by around 11 points.
Wow. Any standout performers?
Yeah, Shuanglin up 148%, JL Mag 132%, MP Materials 124%. And the index itself is broadening. They even added video game and cybersecurity companies recently.
Shows how wide the ecosystem is becoming. What about the China-specific value chain?
Even stronger performance there. The China Humanoid Supply Chain Index is up 27.5% year-to-date, crushing the MSCI China Index, which was up about 17%.
And is that growth coming from components or the robot makers themselves?
Both, really. Component manufacturers, the body, up 26%. Integrators, the ones building the full robots, up 28%. Strong momentum across the board.
Now, the really big numbers, the future projections, Morgan Stanley's TAM model. It's pretty staggering.
It is. They're projecting 1 billion humanoid adoptions globally by 2050.
1 billion.
1 billion. And $5 trillion in annual revenue. That's roughly double the current revenue of the world's top 20 automakers combined.
That's hard to even wrap your head around. How does that adoption ramp up?
The model shows milestones. Maybe around 24 million units by 2036, jumping to over 130 million by 2040, then over 400 million by 2044, hitting that billion by 2050.
And where will these robots be, geographically?
By 2050, the projection is about half in upper middle income countries, which includes China. High-income countries like the U.S. would be around 29%. Regionally, East Asia and Pacific leads with 43%.
What about the cost? That billion number depends on prices coming down, right?
Absolutely. The model assumes average selling prices, ASPs, drop significantly. In high-income countries, maybe from $200 now down to $50K by 2040.
And elsewhere.
In upper middle and lower income countries, starting around $50K now, potentially falling to just $15,000 by 2050. Mass production and local supply chains are key drivers there.
That $15,000 price point is really something. And one last thing from the projections commercial versus household use.
Overwhelmingly commercial, especially initially. The model suggests 935 million commercial units by 2050 versus maybe 84 million in households. The focus is clearly industrial first.
Okay, so let's tie some threads together. Given everything we've discussed, the rapid tech development, the massive funding, China's huge policy push, how do you see this U.S.-China competition really playing out? Especially with that point about AI versus manufacturing and data.
Well, it's fascinating because the report really challenges that conventional wisdom, that the US AI lead is insurmountable. It argues manufacturing and physical intelligence are deeply linked to data.
Right, the data flywheel.
Exactly. And China's lead in patents, the sheer scale of government investment, that $26 billion, and the speed of their deployments, like those competitions and factory rollouts, it suggests they're aggressively building the data probes, the robots themselves.
To collect the data needed to improve the AI.
Precisely. So the big question the report raises is, will scaling manufacturing and physical data collection actually be more critical in the long run than having perhaps a theoretical edge in AI algorithms alone? China seems to be betting heavily on the former.
Interesting. Okay, second point. We saw the Humanoid 100 index performing well and huge market projections. For investors looking at this $5 trillion potential market, where does the momentum seem to be right now? Is it the brain, the body, or the integrators?
If you look at the market performance, especially that China value chain data, the growth is clearly being driven by the body, the component makers, up 26%, and the integrators, the companies building the full systems, up 28%.
So the physical side is leading the charge right now.
It seems so. It aligns perfectly with that surge in funding we talked about, flowing into startups like Unitree and Agibot and component suppliers heading for listings. While the brain, the AI, is obviously critical for intelligence, the market's current energy, the investment flow, it's focused on making these robots physically real and getting them deployed.
Makes sense. The physical realization comes first. Okay, finally, we touched on new models and these falling price points, Unitree potentially under 10K, Hugging Face at $3 or even lower. What are the real-world implications of this? How does it accelerate things beyond just tests?
Well, it's huge, isn't it? When you see prices like that or open source options becoming available for just a few $100s, it drastically lowers the barrier for everyone, researchers, startups, even larger companies wanting to experiment.
Democratizes access, essentially.
Exactly. And connecting that back to the Morgan Stanley projections, their model relies on those ASPs falling dramatically, especially in developing economies, getting down to that $15,000 level.
Right.
So these lower costs, combined with the increasing capabilities, better dexterity, on-device AI reducing latency, that's the combination that could really accelerate the shift, moving from, small pilot programs to much wider commercial use. And eventually, it makes household robots seem less like science fiction and more like a plausible future, driving towards that billion-unit adoption figure.
We've covered a lot of ground here. A deep dive into humanoid robotics really shows a field that's just incredibly dynamic. Rapid innovation, huge investment, this intense global race, especially U.S. versus China.
Yeah, from the AI models and the hardware getting cheaper to the big deployment plans and that massive government backing in China, all the pieces seem to be rapidly falling into place for what could be a truly transformative market.
So the final thought for you to chew on. As these humanoids go from lab prototypes to potentially millions, then billions, working alongside us, how does that fundamentally change things? Think about labor markets, global supply chains, maybe even the very definition of human work. Definitely something to keep watching on this evolving frontier.